The first thing I noticed that morning was the sound, metal clanging, not the usual creak of the barn doors in the wind. It was sharp, deliberate, and wrong. I'd been sitting on the porch with my coffee, watching mist lift off the pasture when it hit me that someone was inside the barn. At first, I thought it was my nephew coming early to help with hay bales, but then I saw the SUV. White, spotless, parked half on my gravel driveway, half on the grass, with a shiny HOA sticker glinting on the bumper like a badge of authority. I sighed. There was only one person who'd drive out this far to pick a fight over property lines and community standards: Karen Whitfield, president of the Lakeview Estates HOA. Karen had been a thorn in my side ever since my old farmhouse became part of the HOA's annexed zone. She hated that my property still looked like an actual farm, with animals, fences, mud, and all. According to her, the sight of my red barn lowered neighborhood aesthetics. She'd sent letters, fines, even a landscaper once without asking. That landscaper left running after my bull, Duke, decided he didn't like weed whackers. But today was different. Karen hadn't come to argue from the sidewalk or wave papers from behind her sunglasses. She'd broken in. When I got close enough to hear her voice echoing inside, I paused. "This is disgusting. Filthy," she was shouting. There was the scrape of boots and something crashing, probably a bucket. Then, "You can't keep animals in a residential district. This is a violation." I almost laughed. She sounded like a city inspector lost in a barn for the first time. Still, I kept my steps quiet. The barn doors were slightly ajar. Through the crack, I saw her. High heels planted in straw, designer coat speckled with dust, phone in one hand recording everything, the other waving dramatically at my stalls. She had no idea Duke was in the next pen, chewing hay and watching her like a bouncer assessing a troublemaker. I leaned on the doorframe. "Morning, Karen. You lost." She spun so fast her heel caught in the straw. "You can't keep trespassing livestock this close to the HOA perimeter," she snapped, straightening her coat like she owned the place. "I've told you repeatedly. This property violates Article 6, Section 4, barn structures and large animals are prohibited within." "This barn's been here since 1947, I interrupted. "Pretty sure your bylaws didn't reach back 70 years. Her jaw tightened. "We extended jurisdiction to this parcel in March. I mailed you the notice." I smiled. "You mean that pamphlet you stuffed in my mailbox without a stamp?" "Yeah, that's not legal notice. That's litter." Karen's face turned the color of a ripe tomato. "You think you're clever, but you can't ignore community rules. We're improving property values for everyone." Behind her, Duke shifted, snorting. Karen froze, finally realizing she wasn't alone. "What is that?" "My bull," I said, walking past her to the stall. "His name's Duke. He doesn't like uninvited guests." She recoiled as Duke snorted again, his horns glinting under the beam of sunlight breaking through the roof slats. "You can't, that's dangerous. I could report you for keeping aggressive animals." "You could," I said, "but you'd have to explain how you ended up inside my locked barn." For a split second I saw panic flicker in her eyes. Then, predictably, she doubled down. "I had probable cause to inspect. There were complaints." "From who?" "Yourself." Karen glared. "You think this is funny? You're harboring a menace. Look at that thing." Duke took that as his cue to stomp once, snort, and swing his head, rattling the gate. Karen jumped back, her phone trembling in her hand. "Maybe you should go," I said, "before Duke gets curious." Instead, she lifted her phone higher. "No, I'm documenting this. The HOA board will see." Duke bellowed, loud enough to shake the rafters. Karen shrieked and stumbled backward into a wheelbarrow, tipping it over. Hay spilled, her heels snapped, and she went down, shrieking. "I couldn't help it," I laughed. She scrambled up, hair sticking out, one shoe gone, face red. "You'll regret this," she hissed, limping toward the door. "The board will hear everything. I'm filing an immediate violation report." "Sure," I said, holding the door open for her. Just make sure you tell them about your illegal entry too. Her SUV roared off, tires spitting gravel, leaving behind a faint trail of perfume and outrage. I looked at Duke, who seemed thoroughly unimpressed. Good boy, I said. That was supposed to be the end of it. But Karen wasn't built to lose quietly. The next day, I got an envelope hand-delivered to my port. Notice of noncompliance, stamped in bold red letters, followed by a fine, $10,000 for unauthorized agricultural activity within the HOA perimeter. I almost spit out my coffee. I took the notice straight to Sheriff Dalton, who had known me since high school. He read it twice and chuckled. She's really trying to claim jurisdiction over your land? He asked. Apparently her power trip doesn't stop at the property line. He nodded. Well, she's trespassing and filing false claims. I'll talk to her. I should have known better than to think a warning would stop her. 2 days later, I caught Karen back near the barn fence, this time with a clipboard and a man in a cheap suit. He had a tape measure and a face that screamed, "Assistant to the tyrant." They were arguing about measurements when I approached. Back again? You know, you could just ask for a tour next time. Karen turned sharply. We're performing an assessment. You'll be receiving demolition orders for non-compliant structures. On what grounds? I asked. Unregistered outbuilding within a protected visual zone, she declared, reading from her clipboard like it was gospel. You mean my barn, I said. The one that's older than the HOA? She ignored me. The man kept measuring. Duke, standing behind the fence, decided he'd had enough. He let out a deep, low rumble that made the clipboard guy freeze mid-step. Karen didn't move fast enough. Duke stomped, snorted, and leaned against the fence just enough to rattle it hard. She squealed and bolted back to her car, dropping the clipboard in the dirt. That moment, I realized something important. Karen wasn't just power-hungry, she was scared of losing control. And that fear made her dangerous. That night, floodlights flashed through my window. A tow truck sat idling in my driveway. Karen stood beside it, waving papers at the driver. I stepped outside, phone recording this time. Evening, I said. Something you want? This structure, she said, pointing toward my barn, is being impounded pending compliance review. Impounded? I repeated, laughing. It's a building, not a Buick. She shoved the paper toward me. It's within my authority as HOA president. Not on private property, it's not. The tow driver looked between us, confused. Ma'am, I can't tow a barn. Karen snapped, then call someone who can. I held up my phone, recording every word. You're trespassing again, Karen. Keep going. I want this on record. Her face twisted. You'll regret mocking me. I'll take my chances, I said. The tow truck backed out slowly, driver shaking his head. Karen's SUV peeled off behind it. For the first time, I realized this feud wasn't going to fizzle out, it was going to explode. She'd crossed from petty fines into obsession. And I had a feeling she'd come back, angrier and dumber than ever. When I went to the barn later that night to check the locks, I found something odd. The latch was scratched. A fresh scuff mark on the door. Someone had tried to pry it open. Duke snorted from his stall, restless. I ran my hand over the splintered edge of the wood and smiled grimly. If Karen wanted a war, she'd just declared it. And the next round would end with her meeting my bull, properly this time. The following morning, I woke up to the sound of honking and shouting outside my front gate. That was already a bad sign. Nobody honked out here. Not unless they were lost, angry, or named Karen Whitfield. When I stepped outside, there she was, standing in the road in full glory. Sunglasses, clipboard, and a brand new neon vest that looked like she'd stolen it from a construction crew. Behind her, a black SUV idled with Lakeview Estates Compliance Division magnet stickers slapped on the doors. Except there was no such division. She'd made them herself. Good morning, I said, walking toward the gate. Did you form your own private army now? Karen didn't flinch. This is an official property compliance inspection. You were served notice. Served by who? You again? She raised her clipboard like a badge. The board unanimously approved this. I looked past her at the SUV. Inside sat two people, a nervous young man and a woman who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Volunteers, probably. Karen must have dragged half the HOA out here to witness her crusade. I leaned on the gatepost. You're trespassing again. You know that, right? We are on public right-of-way, she said crisply. Anything visible from this position is subject to visual compliance review. So the outside of my barn offends you that much? She smiled tightly. Rusting roofs, chipped paint, and inappropriate structures devalue the neighborhood. We have a duty to maintain standards. I could almost admire her commitment to self-delusion. Almost. You're aware this property isn't even technically inside your HOA boundaries? Karen tilted her head, feigning patience. We voted to annex it last month. Yeah, about that vote. You can't just annex private land like it's the Roman Empire. She ignored me, snapping her fingers for the volunteers to get out. Photographs. Every angle. We'll document this before filing the demolition request. The woman hesitated. Ma'am, he said it's private property. Karen barked, then zoom in from here. You can see the violations clearly. The young man lifted his phone reluctantly, snapping shots of my barn, my tractor, even Duke grazing behind the fence. Duke raised his head, snorted once, and stared at them with the patience of a creature deciding whether this new noise was worth charging at. Don't mind the bull, I said. He's got better manners than most HOA presidents. Karen's nostrils flared. Mockery won't help you. You've ignored too many notices. This is your final warning. Final warning for what? Owning a barn? Breathing wrong. She pretended not to hear me. If you don't comply by Friday, I'll be forced to initiate enforcement measures. Enforcement measures? Karen leaned closer, lowering her voice. You'll see. That was the moment I realized she wasn't bluffing. Her tone wasn't dramatic, it was determined. She genuinely thought she could strong-arm me into tearing down a 70-year-old barn because it didn't fit her suburban fantasy. When she finally left, I called Dalton again. Sheriff, I said, she's back. With a squad. He sighed over the phone. You're kidding. I wish. He promised to drive by that afternoon, but I knew Karen wouldn't wait around. She thrived on momentum, on drama. Sure enough, around noon I heard hammering near my mailbox. By the time I got there, Karen was gone, but a new sign stood beside my driveway. Property under HOA review. Trespass subject to fine. I actually laughed. It was laminated. She'd printed it at an office store, probably while feeling triumphant. That night, I took a picture of the sign, printed a new one, and stapled it underneath. Private property. Trespassers will meet Duke. The next morning, the first sign was gone. But mine was still there. For 2 quiet days, I thought maybe she'd finally realized how ridiculous this was. Then, early Saturday, I found her SUV parked behind my fence again. The barn door was cracked open. I didn't even have to think about it this time. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and walked straight over. The smell hit me before I reached the door. Straw, feed, and something acrid, perfume, again. Karen was inside, pacing. What the hell are you doing? I said. She jumped, spinning around. I told you this barn is condemned. By who? You and your clipboard. I have authority. You have a restraining order coming if you don't leave. Karen pointed at the haystack near Duke's stall. That animal is a liability. You'll bankrupt the HOA with your negligence. I'm not even in your HOA, Karen. You are now. The board ratified. Before she could finish, Duke shifted behind her. She startled and turned. He was standing close to the gate now, head lowered, eyes fixed. The kind of look that meant too close. Karen backed up. You control that thing. Duke doesn't like strangers breaking in, I said calmly. Especially loud ones. She fumbled for her phone, trying to film again. I'm collecting evidence. Then Duke moved. Not a full charge, just a warning step. His hooves thundered against the dirt, rattling the stall gate. Karen screamed and bolted toward the door. But her heel caught the edge of a trough, and she went down again, flat in the straw. Her phone skidded across the floor, landing near Duke's gate. He snorted, stretched his nose toward it, and with one quick movement, sent it skittering further away with a horn. Karen scrambled up, covered in hay and panic. Call him off. Call him off. He's not a dog, Karen, I said. You might want to move slower. Sudden movements make him curious. That was all it took. She bolted for the door, half tripping, half crawling, her designer coat torn at the hem. When she reached the open air, she didn't even look back. She sprinted to her car and slammed the door so hard it echoed down the lane. I waited a beat, then looked at Duke. You sure know how to handle a trespasser. He flicked his ear and went back to chewing hay. That should have been the end of it. But Karen wasn't just humiliated, she was furious. That night, someone slashed my fence wire near the road. I spotted the damage in the morning. Clean cuts, too neat to be an animal. Duke hadn't wandered, thank God, but the message was clear. Karen wanted escalation. So I gave it to her. I installed trail cameras along the fence line, the kind that sent motion alerts straight to my phone. Then I called Dalton again. Sheriff, if she shows up again, I want it documented. He agreed. We'll log it officially this time. If she trespasses again, she's done. 3 days passed quietly. Then, just after midnight on Wednesday, my phone buzzed. Motion alert, barn door camera. I pulled up the feed, and sure enough, headlights washed over the barn. Someone got out. It was her. Karen, in a trench coat, flashlight in hand, sneaking across my field like she was in a spy movie. She paused by the fence, then crouched. The camera caught everything, her cutting the padlock on the side door, slipping inside. I didn't even hesitate. I called Dalton on the spot. She's in the barn right now, I said. He told me to stay inside. We're sending a car. But I couldn't help myself. I had to see it. By the time I got to the porch, I heard it, the low, angry bellow of a bull that had been woken up by a flashlight in his face. Then came the scream. It started as a high-pitched yelp and turned into something between terror and disbelief. I ran toward the barn, flashlight swinging. When I reached the door, I saw the beam of her flashlight spinning on the floor, and Karen clinging to the fence post near Duke's stall, screaming her lungs out. He wasn't attacking, just cornering her, head lowered, pawing the ground, daring her to move. Every time she shifted, he snorted. Don't move! I shouted. Stay still, Karen. She froze, trembling. He's going to kill me. No, he's warning you, I said, stepping carefully closer. You scared him, that's all. Her eyes were wild. Get him away. I told you not to come here again, I said evenly. Now you see why. Duke stomped once more, and Karen flinched, whimpering. When the sheriff's truck lights flashed through the open door, I almost laughed from relief. Dalton stepped inside, took one look, and muttered, Well, I'll be damned. Karen turned to him, shaking. Arrest him. That animal attacked me. Dalton's expression didn't change. Ma'am, looks like you're the one trespassing again. She tried to argue, but her voice cracked. He's lying. Duke snorted again, cutting her off. Dalton helped her out of the barn, still muttering under his breath. Once they were outside, he turned to me. I'll file the report. We've got all we need. Karen didn't speak. She just stood by her car, shaking, covered in straw and humiliation. When Dalton finally let her go, she drove off without headlights, her taillights fading into the dark. I leaned against the barn door, listening to the silence settle. Duke snorted once, satisfied. That night, I knew it wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to quit, she was the type to burn everything down to win. And after that scare, she'd be looking for revenge. But so would I. because now I had footage, proof, witnesses, and a bull that clearly didn't like her. And I had plans for all three. The next morning, the story was already spreading through the neighborhood. Apparently, Karen had gone door to door before sunrise, limping on a twisted ankle and telling anyone who would listen that I'd sicked a wild bull on her in the middle of the night. Half the HOA was convinced I was keeping a dangerous animal illegally. The other half just wanted to know how on earth she'd ended up in my barn at midnight in the first place. I spent the morning drinking coffee on the porch, watching the steady stream of SUVs creeping by as residents slowed down to stare at my property. Every single one of them looked like they were rubbernecking a crime scene. Duke stood behind the fence, perfectly calm, chewing cud and flicking his tail. He looked like the picture of serenity, until you remembered he'd nearly scared the HOA president into cardiac arrest. By noon, Dalton showed up again. He parked at the gate, arms crossed, expression halfway between tired and amused. "You sure know how to attract trouble, huh?" he said. "Hey, I don't go looking for it," I replied. "It just breaks into my barn uninvited." He chuckled, then pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "You'll want to see this." She filed an official complaint with the county. Animal endangerment, property blight, unlawful structure. The works. I raised an eyebrow. "She actually took it to the county?" "Yep," he said. They laughed. "But I'm supposed to tell you there'll be an inspection next week just to make sure everything's legal." I sighed. "So she's wasting county time now." "She's trying to bury you in paperwork," he said. "Standard HOA warfare tactic. Don't worry. I'll be around when the inspector comes. Just keep everything in order." That part made me smile. Everything was already in order, except for my patience. Over the next few days, I started noticing Karen's tactics shift from confrontation to manipulation. Flyers appeared on mailboxes around the area with big red letters: "Dangerous livestock, safety hazard." Below it was a grainy photo of Duke mid-snort, looking ferocious. The caption read, "Aggressive bull loose near residential zone. Contact HOA for safety measures." Loose. That was the word that got me. Duke hadn't been loose a day in his life. He stayed behind a reinforced fence with electric wiring and 3 padlocks. The only reason Karen had ever been in danger was because she broke into his space. So, I printed my own flyers. Same format, same bold red letters, but mine said, "Dangerous trespasser, HOA president loose in area." And below it, I put a still frame from my trail camera footage. Karen sneaking into the barn at midnight with a flashlight. I stapled them on the community bulletin boards near the lake and at the corner mail shelter. Within hours, my phone was buzzing with messages from neighbors laughing. Apparently, they thought it was a joke. But the look on Karen's face later that evening told me she didn't. She drove by my house twice that day, once slow and glaring, and again faster, muttering into her phone as if plotting retaliation. I didn't know what form it would take, but I was certain she'd escalate. Sure enough, that Friday, a county vehicle rolled down my driveway, an official seal on the side. Out stepped a woman in a tan jacket carrying a clipboard. "Mr. Hanley?" she asked politely. "That's me. I'm with County Zoning and Agricultural Compliance. We received a complaint about an unregistered livestock structure and dangerous animals." "Let me guess," I said. "From a Mrs. Whitfield?" She hesitated, then smiled knowingly. "You're not the first person to ask that." I led her to the barn, explaining the history of the property as we walked. She took notes, measured a few posts, checked the fence, and even fed Duke a carrot. He leaned in, calm as a monk. "This animal is well behaved," she said, surprised. "Gentle giant," I replied. "Unless someone trespasses." She nodded. "Everything looks compliant to me. You're clear. I'll file the report today." I thanked her, but as soon as her car disappeared down the road, I saw Karen's SUV parked 2 houses away, half hidden behind a row of trees. She'd been watching the inspection the whole time. That evening, I got an email from the HOA. The subject line read, "Urgent Notice, Animal Nuisance Committee Meeting." Apparently, they were holding a special session to discuss removal of livestock hazards. In other words, I showed up. The meeting was held at the clubhouse, one of those over-decorated halls with fake plants and framed photos of smiling families. About 20 people sat in folding chairs, most of them curious, some irritated, a few clearly just there for the popcorn. Karen sat at the front with her laptop open, like she was running a courtroom. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "We're here to address a serious safety issue endangering our neighborhood." I raised my hand immediately. "You mean your inability to stay off private land?" A ripple of laughter spread through the room. Karen's smile tightened. "Mr. Hanley, you'll have your turn." "Sure," I said. "Just making sure we define safety issue correctly." She clicked to the next slide, a blown-up picture of Duke Midsnort again, projected onto the wall. "This animal has displayed aggressive behavior, including charging at community members." "Community members," I said loudly, "meaning you?" Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Karen tried to regain control. "This is not about personal grudges. This is about protecting our children, our pets, our peace of mind." "Karen," said one of the older residents near the back, "didn't you break into his barn?" "I entered to document a violation," she snapped. "Without permission?" another man added. "That's trespassing." Karen's cheeks flushed crimson. "I was performing my duty as HOA president." I stood. "If your duty involves cutting my locks and scaring my bull, maybe you should reconsider your hobbies." The room erupted into laughter again, this time louder. Someone actually clapped. Karen's composure cracked. "This is harassment. This meeting is over." She slammed her laptop shut and stormed out. The rest of the board followed awkwardly. I lingered for a minute, chatting with a few neighbors who admitted they were tired of her antics. Apparently, she'd fined one guy for leaving a hose out overnight and another for having a non-compliant mailbox color. By the time I got home, I knew something had changed. The neighborhood was finally turning against her. But Karen didn't do well with losing face. The more cornered she felt, the more desperate she became. That night, just before midnight, my phone buzzed again, another motion alert from the barn. My stomach sank. When I checked the feed, I didn't see Karen this time. I saw two figures in dark hoodies carrying something heavy, a sack maybe? They crept around the barn and disappeared behind it. I grabbed my flashlight and shotgun, not to use but to make a point, and went out quietly. The air was thick, the moon pale. I stayed low, circling around the side path. When I got close enough, I saw what they were doing. They were dumping garbage, actual black trash bags, behind my barn. Food scraps, plastic, and something that smelled awful. Then they started taking pictures. I shouted, "Hey!" They froze. One bolted instantly toward the road, but the other tripped, scrambling to his feet. The light hit his face just long enough for me to see him, the same young man from Karen's so-called compliance squad. He panicked, muttered something about just following orders, and sprinted away into the dark. By morning, the garbage was gone, but the smell lingered, and so did the evidence on my cameras. I sent the footage straight to Dalton. He came by within hours, shaking his head. "She's really losing it," he said. "Staging violations now?" "I told you she wouldn't stop," I said. He sighed. "We'll file charges this time. That's tampering and illegal dumping." Finally, something that stuck. But as Dalton drove off, I noticed Karen's SUV creeping by again, slower than usual. She stopped for a moment, glaring straight at me, then sped off without a word. For the first time, I saw something new in her expression, not outrage, not superiority. Fear. She was realizing this fight wasn't going her way anymore. But I also knew she wasn't done. She'd hit her limit with legal threats, public humiliation, and failed stunt. The next move would be personal and dangerous. I could feel it in the way the air seemed heavier, How Duke paced near the fence that evening, restless. Something was coming. And when it did, it wouldn't be about property lines anymore. It would be about pride, power, and revenge. And Karen wasn't going to back down until one of us broke. 2 days later, I woke up to the sound of rain pelting the roof, and my phone buzzing non-stop. A dozen messages from neighbors filled the screen. Photos, screenshots, and one text that simply said, "You need to see this." I opened one of the pictures and nearly spit my coffee. Someone had spray painted across the side of my barn in dripping black letters, HOA Menace. The paint was fresh, streaks still glistening from the rain. I threw on my boots and jogged out into the mud. Duke was restless, shifting behind the fence, snorting like he knew something was wrong. The smell of paint mixed with wet straw made my stomach twist. I snapped pictures for evidence, then checked the trail cameras again. The footage was grainy in the rain, but clear enough. Karen's SUV headlights cutting across my drive at 2:13 a.m. She'd parked by the fence, gotten out in a rain poncho, and spray-painted my barn wall like a teenager vandalizing a rival school's locker room. Then she'd stood back, admired her work, and driven off. That was the final straw. By 9 a.m., Dalton was at my place again, rain dripping off his hat as he studied the footage. "She's out of control," he said. "Breaking and entering, vandalism, false reports. I can arrest her for this." "Then do it," I said. "I've been more than patient." He sighed. "I will, but I have to run it through the county attorney first. If we do this wrong, she'll spin it like harassment." "Spin it?" I snapped. "She painted my barn, Dalton. She's lost her mind." He nodded slowly. "I know. Just stay calm. Don't do anything that'll make it worse." But the problem was, staying calm had stopped working. Karen was feeding off control. Every rule, every petty act was her way of reminding me she thought she could win. The only thing she hadn't anticipated was that I could fight back quietly. That night I didn't sleep. I stayed up in the kitchen with the lights off, watching the security feeds on my laptop. Rain turned to fog, the world went quiet, and for a few hours I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd finally scared herself into stopping. Then, around 3:45 a.m., Duke's pen camera pinged. A faint figure moved along the back fence line again. It wasn't Karen this time. It was a man. He wore a hood and carried a toolbox, cutting through the mud toward the barn door. I zoomed in. He wasn't trying to break in. He was cutting wires. The electric fence. I bolted out the door, flashlight in hand, boots slipping on the wet ground. By the time I reached the barn, the intruder was halfway through the side gate, crouched near the power junction. "Hey!" I shouted. He turned, startled. For a split second I saw his face. The same man from the HOA meeting who'd held Karen's tape measure. Then he dropped his tools and ran. I chased him through the mud but lost him at the tree line where a car engine roared to life. Taillights vanished into the fog. When I got back to the barn, the wires hung loose and the junction box was smashed. Sparks fizzled in the puddles. Duke was riled up, pacing hard, snorting like thunder. I calmed him down and patched what I could, then called Dalton again. By sunrise, his patrol car was parked by the fence. "She sent someone this time," I said. He studied the footprints, the tools, the camera footage. "We'll get her for conspiracy and property damage. You've got enough evidence to bury her in court." But as he talked, something strange happened. Karen herself drove up. She pulled her SUV right behind his cruiser, stepping out with perfect posture and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning, Sheriff," she said sweetly. "I heard there was another incident. I came to check on community safety." Dalton's jaw tightened. "Funny timing. I take my responsibilities seriously," she replied. "Especially when dangerous equipment and livestock are involved." I folded my arms. "Your handyman almost got himself fried cutting my fence." Her expression flickered, just for a moment. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I have him on camera, Karen. Same guy you brought to inspect my property." Then you should call the sheriff, she said innocently. Oh wait, you already did. Dalton stepped forward. Mrs. Whitfield, we've got multiple reports of you trespassing and damaging property. You need to leave right now. Karen looked at him like he was a disobedient waiter. I'm the HOA president. I have jurisdiction here. You don't, Dalton said flatly. This isn't HOA property. It's private land. For the first time, I saw something new behind her smugness. Panic. Just a flicker, gone in a heartbeat. She turned to me and hissed, "You think this makes you untouchable? You're a blight on this neighborhood. People are afraid of you. That animal of yours is a weapon." "Maybe," I said. "But he's a lawful one." She stormed back to her SUV, tires spitting mud, and peeled off so fast Dalton had to step aside. He looked at me, shaking his head. "I'll file the vandalism report and push for an arrest. But something tells me she's not done." "She's never done," I said quietly. And I was right. 2 nights later, I heard a loud metallic clang from the barn. When I got there, Duke was gone. For a second, my brain refused to process it. The gate was open, the latch snapped clean, and fresh tire tracks cut across the mud. I followed them toward the road until they disappeared into the gravel. Duke, my bull, my friend, my living line of defense, was gone. I called Dalton immediately, voice shaking. "They took him." "Who?" "Who do you think?" By dawn, every deputy in the county was looking for a bull on the loose. Neighbors posted on Facebook, warning drivers. Some even offered to help search. I knew Duke wouldn't go far, he'd grown up here. But if he got spooked, he could end up anywhere. Around noon, I got a call from a farmer 3 miles out. "You missing a big red bull?" he asked. Found him standing in my soybean field, calm as a statue. I drove out there in record time. Duke was standing near the fence line, muddy but unharmed. He came right over when he saw me, snorting softly like nothing had happened. A broken section of trailer hitch nearby told the rest of the story. Someone had tried to load him up, but Duke must have refused to move or kicked the trailer apart. When I got back, Dalton met me at the barn. "We found the trailer," he said. "Dumped near the highway. Registration's fake, but the paint matches Karen's SUV bumper where she scraped it last week." It was all unraveling. Her control, her reputation, her sanity. By evening, she'd sent a mass email to every HOA member claiming I'd staged the bullnapping myself to frame her. But this time, people weren't buying it. Screenshots of her vandalism and my footage were already circulating online. Someone even posted the midnight barn video with the caption, "When HOA presidents go too far." It went viral in the local Facebook groups overnight. The next morning, she showed up again. Not to fight, but to plead. She waited by the gate, hair unkempt, eyes red from lack of sleep. "Please," she said as I approached. "Take it all down. The videos, the posts. I can't have this ruin my life." I stared at her. "You broke into my barn 3 times. You vandalized my property. You kidnapped my bull." "I didn't," she started, but her voice cracked. "It got out of hand. I just wanted you to follow the rules. There were never your rules to begin with." For a moment, I thought I saw regret flicker across her face. But then her expression hardened again. "If you don't take it down, I'll sue for defamation." I smiled. "Go ahead. You'll have to explain the part where you met my bull." She flinched like I'd hit her. "You're a cruel man." "No," I said. "I'm a patient one." She left without another word. That evening, Dalton called. "She's been charged with trespassing, vandalism, and conspiracy. County attorney's handling it now." "Good," I said. "Maybe that'll finally end this." But even as I said it, part of me knew Karen wasn't the type to surrender gracefully. The charges might have stopped her from showing up in person, but people like her always found one last way to get revenge. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, I found out what hers would be. She'd requested a hearing with the county zoning board, not just to fight the charges, but to propose that my land be condemned for unsafe livestock conditions. She was still trying to tear down my barn. Only this time, she'd have to face a room full of witnesses, cameras, and one very calm man with evidence, and a bull with better manners than her entire HOA combined. The final showdown was coming. And I was done playing defense. The county zoning hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. The notice came on official letterhead, signed by a clerk who sounded half apologetic when she called me to confirm. "We don't usually hold hearings over a private barn," she said. But, well, Mrs. Whitfield was quite insistent. Of course she was. Karen had been quiet for almost 2 weeks, and silence from her was more dangerous than noise. She'd licked her wounds, rebuilt her image just enough, and was now trying to weaponize bureaucracy one last time. I spent the days leading up to the hearing preparing like a lawyer in a murder trial. Dalton helped me print the reports, trespassing charges, vandalism evidence, screenshots of her fake compliance squad, and every still frame from my cameras showing her sneaking around the barn. I even brought in a written statement from the agricultural inspector confirming everything was compliant and legal. By the time I was done, I had a 3-inch binder labeled Evidence, HOA Harassment. The morning of the hearing, I put on my cleanest flannel, trimmed my beard, and drove into town. The zoning board met inside a beige county building that smelled faintly of coffee and copier ink. When I walked in, the first thing I saw was Karen sitting at the front of the room in a navy blue suit, papers stacked neatly before her. She'd ditched the sunglasses and the attitude. Now she looked polished, sympathetic, like a victim rehearsing her testimony. She didn't even glance at me when I took a seat. But her attorney, yes, she'd hired one, gave me a look that said he thought I was about to lose. The chairman called the hearing to order. Karen stood first, smiling with perfect restraint. "Good morning, members of the board," she began. "I come before you today not out of personal animosity, but concern for public safety and neighborhood integrity." I nearly laughed. Her tone was sweet honey over arsenic. She continued, "The property in question houses an aggressive animal, an unsafe structure, and repeated code violations that endanger nearby residents. We've suffered fear, property value loss, and, frankly, intimidation." One of the board members asked, "Do you have evidence of these claims?" Karen nodded to her lawyer, who opened a folder of photos, all zoomed in, misleading angles. Duke mid-snort, the barn under harsh light, the spray paint she herself had left but cropped to look like vandalism against me. It was manipulative, but almost clever. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly, walked to the podium, and set down my binder with a satisfying thud. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "what you just heard is a creative piece of fiction. The truth looks more like this." I flipped open the first tab. A clear photo of Karen caught on my trail camera, flashlight in hand, inside my barn at midnight. Gasps rippled through the small crowd. Karen stiffened. "Here's the same woman," I continued, "spray painting my barn wall 2 weeks ago. And here she is again, cutting the lock off my fence." I moved through the slides like clockwork, each image worse for her case. By the time I reached the part about the attempted bull theft, even the board members were whispering. Karen's attorney tried to object, claiming the footage was taken out of context, but one of the members cut him off. "Sir, your client broke into private property 3 times, she said flatly. Karen's composure cracked. "He's dangerous," she burst out. "That animal is a threat. The only person Duke has ever scared," I said evenly, "is the one who broke into his barn. 3 times. A ripple of laughter spread. Even the chairman smiled faintly before clearing his throat. After 20 more minutes of questions, the board called a recess to deliberate. Karen sat frozen in her seat, glaring at me like she could set me on fire by sheer willpower. I didn't say a word, I just leaned back and waited. When they returned, the chairman read the verdict. After reviewing all evidence, the board finds no grounds for violation or condemnation. Furthermore, due to ongoing harassment and property damage, we recommend referral to the county prosecutor for review of Mrs. Whitfield's actions." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Karen's mouth fell open. Her lawyer whispered something urgent, but she wasn't listening. She was staring straight at me, pure fury and disbelief in her eyes. I gave her the smallest smile. "Told you Duke's harmless," I said. That was the moment she lost it. "You've ruined me," she hissed. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. You think this is over? You'll regret this." "Ma'am," one of the clerks said, "please lower your voice." Karen snapped her folder shut, stormed past me, and shoved open the doors so hard they banged against the walls. She didn't even look back. The whole room was silent for a beat. Then Dalton, standing in the back, said under his breath, "Well, that went about as expected." I laughed for the first time in weeks. "I'll drink to that." Outside, the sky was bright and crisp, the kind of clean light that comes after a long storm. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. For once, it felt like the war might actually be over. But as I turned into my driveway, something made my stomach drop. The gate was open. I stopped the truck, heart pounding. The lock wasn't broken this time. It was simply gone. Taken. The chain hung loose. I stepped out carefully, scanning the property. Everything looked normal, until I saw the piece of paper nailed to the barn door. It was a single sheet from a spiral notebook, written in frantic handwriting. "You think you won. You haven't. This is my neighborhood." I stood there for a long moment, the wind tugging at the edges of the paper. It wasn't even the threat itself that got to me, it was the sheer desperation behind it. Karen wasn't fighting for rules anymore. She was fighting to preserve whatever illusion of control she had left. I called Dalton again. "She's still at it," I said. He sighed. "We'll put a patrol on your road for a while. She's unraveling, but let the system handle it now. No more back and forth." I wanted to agree. I really did. But as night fell, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing. Around 10 p.m., the power went out. Every light in the house flickered and died, plunging the place into black silence. I grabbed a flashlight and checked the breaker box. All fine. Then I heard it, the distant hum of an engine somewhere near the barn. I went out the back door, careful not to step on the gravel. The fog was thick again, curling over the pasture like smoke. I could barely see the outline of the barn, but the faint glow of headlights shimmered against the mist. Someone was there. I crept closer, every muscle tense. The air smelled of exhaust and mud. I could make out a shadow moving near the side wall, and the unmistakable hiss of a fuel can being opened. For a second my brain refused to believe it, but then I saw the flick of a lighter. "Hey!" I shouted, sprinting forward. The figure froze, Karen. Her face lit by the brief flare of the lighter's flame, wild and tear-streaked. "You took everything from me," she screamed. "Everything." I grabbed the can from her before she could react, throwing it into the mud. The lighter dropped from her shaking hand, landing harmlessly in the wet grass. "What the hell are you doing?" I yelled. She was crying now, gasping between words. They took my position. The board voted me out. Everyone's laughing at me because of you. You did that yourself, Karen." She staggered back, still shaking. "You don't get it. I built this neighborhood. I made it perfect. And you," she jabbed a finger toward me, trembling, "you ruined it with your dirt and your animals and your barn." I stood there, drenched in fog and rain, looking at the woman who'd made my life miserable for months. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I just felt tired. "You need help," I said quietly. "Real help." The sheriff's headlights appeared behind her then, slicing through the mist. Dalton and another deputy stepped out, guns drawn but calm. Karen didn't resist. She just slumped against the fence, sobbing as they cuffed her. Dalton gave me a long, weary look. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, voice low. "Just wish it hadn't come to this." As they led her to the cruiser, she turned to me one last time. "You'll regret this," she whispered, almost pleading. I didn't answer. I just watched the car disappear down the dirt road until the sound of the engine faded completely. When I turned back toward the barn, Duke was standing by the fence, silent and steady, watching me. The floodlights flickered back on as the generator kicked in. For the first time, the farm felt peaceful again. But I knew it wasn't over yet, not entirely. Karen was gone for now, but chaos like hers doesn't vanish overnight. It waits, festers, looks for another way to crawl back. Still, for that night at least, the air was clean, and my bull, my barn, and my peace were still standing. The days following Karen's arrest felt surreal. For the first time in months, my phone didn't buzz with complaints, notices, or photos of code violations. The air felt lighter, even the neighborhood quieter. I half expected to see her white SUV lurking around the corner, but it never came. Instead, people I barely knew started stopping by my gate, not to complain, but to talk. Mrs. Jenkins from 2 houses down brought over a pie. "You did us all a favor," she said, half whispering. "That woman's been terrorizing this neighborhood for years." Another neighbor, Tom, came by with a handshake. "Heard what happened," he said. "Can't believe she tried to burn your barn. You're a patient man." Patience wasn't exactly what I felt. Relief, maybe. A deep, heavy kind that comes after a storm finally ends, but also a strange emptiness. For months, Karen had been a constant presence, an enemy that gave my days direction. Now that she was gone, the quiet almost felt wrong. Dalton stopped by that weekend. He leaned on the porch railing, coffee in hand, looking at the barn. "County prosecutor says she's getting charged with attempted arson, trespassing, and vandalism. Probably probation, maybe community service. No prison, but she's done with the HOA." "Done?" I asked. He nodded. "They voted to remove her permanently. Some of the board members even want to dissolve the whole thing. She pushed too far, and now they're eating each other alive." I smiled faintly. "Guess she finally managed to ruin her own perfect neighborhood." Dalton chuckled. "You'll get your peace back. Just don't gloat too much." "I'm not gloating," I said. "I'm just glad I can finally sleep without motion alerts every 2 hours." But deep down, I didn't quite believe it was over. People like Karen didn't just disappear quietly. They lingered in gossip, in stories, in the cracks of local rumor. And sure enough, a week later, her name popped up again. Someone posted on the local Facebook page, "Did anyone else see Karen's house for sale?" followed by a photo of a for sale sign on her lawn. The comments section exploded. Some celebrated, others speculated. A few even defended her, claiming she'd been pushed too far by rural bullies. I didn't comment. I just scrolled and moved on. Life slowly returned to normal. I fixed the electric fence properly this time, replaced the spray-painted panels, and even added new security lights around the property. Duke seemed calmer too, like he sensed the tension had finally drained from the air. The mornings became routine again, coffee, chores, quiet. Then one afternoon, I found an envelope wedged in my mailbox. No return address, no stamp. Just my name written in shaky handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Thank you for not pressing for prison. I'm leaving town. You won't see me again. But please tell them, I only ever wanted to make things better. K." I stood there on the porch, reading it twice. The ink was smudged, like it had been written in a rush or through tears. For a second I felt something unexpected, pity. Karen had been unbearable, vindictive, and irrational, but she wasn't pure evil. She was a woman who built her entire sense of worth on being in charge, on controlling others, and when she lost that, she imploded. I folded the note and tucked it inside my desk drawer. Not out of sentiment, but as a reminder that even the worst people can fall apart quietly when the noise ends. For a few weeks, things stayed calm. The HOA board officially dissolved, neighbors stopped getting fined for nonsense, and a kind of strange camaraderie grew around the whole ordeal. People laughed about the barn incident at cookouts. The story became local legend, half cautionary tale, half-rural myth. Then one evening in late spring, a moving truck pulled into Karen's old driveway. I watched from my porch as a new family started unloading boxes, a young couple and their little girl. The husband waved when he spotted me. "Hey there. We're the Carvers. Looks like we're your new neighbors." I waved back. "Welcome to Lakeview." They were polite, quiet, and easygoing. The kind of neighbors you could actually live next to without wanting to tear your hair out. Within a week, they'd repainted the shutters, planted some flowers, and waved every morning. Everything was, finally, normal. Until the letter arrived. It came in the mail like any other piece of junk. Plain white envelope, no return address. Inside was a printed sheet with only 2 words. "Check the barn." For a long moment I just stared at it. My first thought was that it had to be some prank. Maybe one of the neighbors thought it'd be funny to stir old ghosts. But something about the typeface, uniform, almost mechanical, made my skin crawl. I grabbed my flashlight and headed out. The sun had already dipped below the trees, the sky bruised with fading light. Duke was restless, pacing near the fence, snorting softly. "Easy, boy," I said, pushing open the barn door. Everything looked normal at first glance. Tools hung neatly, hay stacked in the corner, feed bags sealed. But then I saw it. The back door was slightly ajar. I hadn't used that one in weeks. I pulled it open slowly, the hinges creaking. On the ground outside, half buried in mud, lay a small black box. I crouched down, wiped off the dirt, and froze. It was a trail camera. One of mine, but not where I'd mounted it. Someone had removed it from the fence post and placed it here deliberately. Back inside, I plugged it into my laptop and opened the footage. The first few clips were normal. Duke wandering, birds flying, a few cars on the road. But then came one recorded just 2 nights earlier. Headlights again. A vehicle pulling into my driveway at 2 a.m. It wasn't Karen's SUV this time. It was a dark van with no plates. The camera caught a figure stepping out, tall, wearing a hoodie, moving with purpose. They didn't go toward the barn. They went to the porch. The footage cut off right as the person reached my front door. I replayed it twice, my pulse pounding harder each time. Whoever it was, they'd been here while I slept. I called Dalton immediately. "You might want to see something," I said. He arrived 20 minutes later, leaning over my shoulder as I replayed the footage. "That's not her," he said quietly. "But someone knows about what happened here. Maybe a copycat, maybe a grudge." "Could it be one of her friends from the HOA?" I asked. "Possibly," he said. "Or someone who blames you for how it ended." He took the camera for evidence and promised to have a patrol pass by more often. "You're probably fine," he said. "Could be kids messing around. But keep your doors locked." After he left, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house sounded amplified. Every flicker of the security light outside made my chest tighten. I sat by the window with Duke visible through the dark, a steady silhouette in the field. Around midnight, my phone buzzed, motion alert. I grabbed it instantly. The feed showed the barn's side camera. The door was open again. Heart hammering, I grabbed my flashlight and rifle and stepped outside. The air was cold and wet, the kind that soaked into your bones. As I crossed the yard, I saw movement near the barn. A flash of fabric, then nothing. "Who's there?" I shouted. No answer. I swung the flashlight beam across the open door, empty. But then Duke bellowed from his stall, loud and furious. I rushed in just in time to see the back door swinging shut again. Whoever it was had slipped out the rear exit into the woods. I chased to the tree line, but all I found were footprints, deep, fast, heading north toward the old service road. When I came back, Duke was still pacing, snorting like thunder. I calmed him down and locked every door, bolted every window. Lying awake that night, staring at the ceiling, a thought hit me that chilled me more than the cold outside. What if it wasn't random? What if someone wasn't copying Karen, but helping her? The letter hadn't said barn as a warning. It had said it as an instruction. Like whoever sent it knew what I'd find, and wanted me to know I wasn't alone. I looked out at the barn again, its silhouette dark against the moonlight. Duke was calm now, resting. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the quiet was lying to me again, waiting, like it had before. And somewhere out there, in the trees, someone else knew exactly where I lived. For the next few days, I lived like a man waiting for a shoe to drop that never quite hit the floor. The sheriff's patrol cars passed by twice a night, their headlights sweeping over the wet fields like slow-moving lighthouses. But even with them, the silence felt heavier than usual. Duke paced restlessly after sunset, snorting at shadows, and every time I drifted off to sleep, I'd wake to the faint creak of something settling, or something watching. By the fourth night, I was done being scared of ghosts. I'd spent months letting Karen and her nonsense dictate my peace, and I wasn't about to give another nameless intruder that kind of power. So I decided to bait them. I moved the barn cameras to wider angles, repositioned a few solar lights, and left the side door unlocked. But this time, rigged with a silent alarm that pinged my phone the instant it opened. I even left a single lantern burning inside to draw attention. Then I waited. The first night, nothing happened. The second, the wind knocked over a shovel, and I almost sprinted out there rifle first. But on the third night, the alarm finally buzzed at 2:18 a.m. I opened the feed, and my blood went cold. The figure was back. Same hoodie, same deliberate movements, but this time they weren't cutting wires or lurking. They were carrying something. A canister. For a heartbeat, I thought it might be fuel again, but as the figure stepped into the light, I saw the label. Ammonia cleaner. Industrial grade. I didn't wait. I grabbed my rifle, flashlight, and phone and moved fast. By the time I reached the porch, the barn door was half open. Inside, Duke was agitated, hooves pounding the dirt. "Hey!" I shouted, voice echoing off the rafters. The intruder froze, flashlight beam jerking wildly before swinging toward me. For a split second, our lights crossed, and I saw his face. Not Karen. Not even close. It was her husband. Harold Whitfield, gray-haired, heavy-set, normally the silent type who stood behind her during HOA meetings like a bodyguard. He looked exhausted, eyes bloodshot, face streaked with sweat. "Harold," I said, lowering my weapon just a little. "What the hell are you doing?" He swallowed, his voice cracking. "She told me you ruined her life. Said everyone laughed at her because of you. Said you destroyed everything we built." "She destroyed it herself," I said sharply. "You know that." He shook his head, trembling. "You don't understand. She's gone. She left the hospital last night. Nobody knows where she is." "What do you mean, gone?" "She was in a facility. They said she needed a break, just a few weeks. But she escaped. She left a note. Said she was coming home, to fix everything." My heart thudded once, heavy and cold. "You think she's coming here?" He looked around like a man being hunted. "She called me an hour ago. She said she was going to finish what she started. I came to warn you. I didn't know how else to." A sound cut him off. A car door slamming outside. We both turned toward the open barn door. Headlights cut across the field again, bouncing along the dirt road, getting closer fast. Harold's face drained of color. "That's her." I didn't even think. I grabbed him by the arm and dragged him behind the feed barrels. "Stay down." The SUV screeched to a stop outside, engine running. The driver's door opened. Then came the unmistakable click of heels on gravel. Karen's voice, raw and unhinged, echoed into the barn. "You think you can take everything from me and walk away?" I peeked around the doorframe. She looked nothing like the immaculate woman who once ran HOA meetings with color-coded binders. Her hair was wild, her clothes disheveled, her eyes darting with an unfocused fury. She clutched a red gas can in one hand and a lighter in the other. "Karen, stop!" I shouted, stepping into view. She froze, spotting me instantly. "You," she hissed. "The man who ruined my life." "Put it down," I said. "We don't need to do this." "You made me a joke," she screamed. My neighbors whisper about me. My husband hides from me. You took everything. Harold stood then, hands raised. Karen, please. She spun on him like she'd been struck. You're supposed to be on my side. I am, he said, voice breaking. But this isn't the way. Liar, she shouted, tossing the gas can forward. It clattered onto the dirt, half empty but enough to send Duke into a panic. The bull roared, slamming against his stall door. The noise filled the barn like thunder. Karen flinched, stumbling backward, and the lighter slipped from her hand. It hit the ground, just once, but the spark that flashed was enough to make my stomach lurch. I lunged, kicking it away into a puddle near the trough. The flame hissed out instantly, but Karen screamed, furious. You can't stop me. I grabbed her wrists as she swung wildly, tears and rain streaking her face. It's over, I shouted. Look around you. You've lost everything because you couldn't stop controlling people. For a second, her face softened, like the words had reached something buried deep. But then she twisted free, backing toward the open door, gasping for air. Duke bellowed again, the noise shaking the walls. The sound must have jolted her back to reality because she stopped, trembling. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered. I just wanted things to be perfect again. Perfection's a prison, Karen, I said quietly. You built it, and it broke you. She stared at me, eyes flickering with something that wasn't anger anymore, just emptiness. Then, before either of us could move, she turned and ran into the fog. Harold started after her, but I grabbed his arm. Let her go. He hesitated, tears running down his face. She's sick. She doesn't know who she is anymore. I know, I said. But right now, you'll only get hurt. Dalton's cruiser appeared minutes later, lights flashing. We told him everything. He radioed it in, sending deputies down both roads, but by dawn there was still no sign of her. Just an abandoned SUV half a mile away, doors open, headlights dead. They searched for 2 days. Helicopters, dogs, drones. Nothing. She'd vanished into the marshland near the lake where the HOA signs still stood like sentinels of a failed kingdom. When the search was finally called off, Harold came by one last time. He looked hollow but calm, like a man learning how to breathe again. She always said Lakeview was her masterpiece, he told me quietly. Now it's just gone. I'm sorry, I said. For both of you. He nodded. Take care of that bull. She hated him, but I think he's the only one who ever scared her enough to stop. He left town the next day. The weeks that followed felt strange, peaceful, but uneasy. The county cleaned up the wrecked signs, repainted the curbs, and neighbors started calling the place Lakeview Estates again without flinching. But every time fog rolled in off the water, I'd catch myself glancing at the treeline, half expecting to see her silhouette watching. One evening, near sunset, I went down to the lake to fix a broken fence post. The water was still, glassy, the air thick with crickets. That's when I saw something floating near the reeds. A shoe. A woman's heel, mud-caked and worn. The sheriff's team came again, searched the lake thoroughly. They found nothing else. No body, no clothes, no trace. Dalton told me quietly afterward, we'll list her as missing. Maybe that's for the best. I didn't argue. Some endings don't need answers. Months passed. Summer gave way to autumn. Duke grew slower, calmer, like he knew the storm had passed for good. I painted over the last of the black spray paint, fixed the fence one final time, and replaced the old wooden sign by the driveway. It used to read Hanley Farm. Now it said simply, no trespassing, seriously. Most people laughed when they saw it. A few didn't get the joke. But those who'd lived through it knew exactly what it meant. Every now and then, when the wind blows just right, I swear I can still hear echoes of her voice on the breeze. Not shouting, not angry, just whispering in that brittle, desperate tone she used when she thought no one was listening. Maybe it's memory. Maybe it's guilt. Or maybe it's the land itself, remembering what happened here. Either way, I don't go near the lake after dark anymore. And when Duke snorts at the trees some nights, I just pat his side and tell him, "Don't worry, boy. Some ghosts just like to wander." Because in Lakeview, perfection was the real curse, and some people never stop chasing it, even after they're gone. The neighborhood survived, the barn still stands, and the bull still guards his pasture. But every time fog crawls over the fields, I remember the woman who tried to destroy everything she couldn't control, and ended up being swallowed by the one thing she never could: her own reflection in the dark. For everyone else, life moved on. But I'll never forget that night in the barn, the hiss of the lighter, the sound of hooves, and the look in her eyes when she realized the world wouldn't bend to her anymore. That's when the war ended, not with fire or fines, but with silence. And for the first time in a long time, I learned to love that silence.